Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Pure Kino podcast. And I am joined here today by a man who I have been watching for a very, very long time since I was pretty much in middle school. He is the creator of the long running and popular Arby and the Chief series, which combines live action footage along with in game film known as Machinima. We'll talk about that. But I'm joined here today by Jon Graham. How are you doing today?
I'm very good. Thank you for having me.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you so much for being here. I want to be cool during this interview, but this really is an honor for me. You're one of the inspirations that really made me want to create content. I've been a fan of your show and also your blog, the one that used to be on Blogspot. I used to read
Oh
that back
God.
in the day, and yeah, it's pretty awesome to me that I'm at this point now where I could actually have a conversation with you. But yeah, just kind of getting started here. I'd love to give some context to my audience. Tell me how you first kind of got started, creating YouTube videos.
So that would have been around 2007, and YouTube back then was much different than it is now, and just in its infancy. People were uploading all kinds of stuff. I'm gonna have an inclination to swear sometimes. I don't know if you
Yo,
care
go for
about
it.
that in your
You
podcast.
go
Okay,
for it.
cool.
Yeah.
So, uh, I was a big gamer. I always have been, and I was really into Halo. The Halo 3 beta, multiplayer beta, was coming out, and I had this action figure of Master Chief, and I was playing around with the dated text to speech engines on Windows XP at the time, and I was just messing around, and I just sort of like connected a bunch of dots in my head, and I'm just like, well, I just discovered this new thing, YouTube, and it was really taken off, obviously, right? So I said, I'll just make something stupid. I'll put it on there and I'll see what happens. And I had fun doing it. I wasn't trying to fulfill any kind of obligation. I wasn't part of a network or whatever. I'm just like, I'll just make this dumb video and whatever. It'll be fun, even if it doesn't catch on. Uh, but it did, and it got like millions of hits. And then after that, I got noticed by a company called Machinima.com based in Los Angeles, and then I worked with them, and I created Arby and the Chief, the series for them. Well, I mean, it wasn't just for them, but like when I was under their employ, that's when I started developing that show. I put a lot of myself into that show, and I did that for 7 seasons, and then the company doesn't exist anymore. So I'm just producing content on my own now, going independent, and just building up my channel from where I left off before Machinima, basically. And I'm still producing content today.
Yeah. Now that's awesome. I definitely, watched your stuff on Machinima. It's one of the platforms that, introduced you to a lot of your fans. But I'm so glad that you're still able to make content independent of Machinima. I know that was a whole ordeal. I've seen your video talking about it. And, I don't want to dredge up bad memories, but how has, the process changed for you? Doing it now as an independent versus as part of that network has is it a different process or is it more or less the same day in day out?
It's a lot more relaxed because, like, if I need to take some time off, I can just be like, okay, I need a break, guys, and my audience is cool with it. And when I was working with Machinima, the pace was furious. Like, it was just like, as soon as I got a video out, I'm just like, I'd be like, okay, I can like relax for an hour, and then it's like I gotta get on to writing the next episode like ASAP, early the next morning, and just spend all day. And it's like that first day of the next week, it's just like, okay, I'll just brainstorm and get ideas down on paper, but no pressure to get something finalized yet. But then as the days go by, it's like you're 2 weeks into the week, or 2 days into the week, 3 days into the week. It's like, oh shit, I still don't have a finished draft. I got to start shooting soon. And then it's just like, it was a nightmare. And I'd constantly like keep having to ask Machinima for like time off, and it got embarrassing because I kept doing it so often. But the pace was just so frenetic. Like I had a hard time dealing with that.
I totally get that. I feel the same way. Even independent sometimes is like, your audience is cool and they're open to, you doing what you need to do, but at the same time there's like this expectation that like, okay, they haven't heard from me in a little while, need to start working on something. So I could totally understand that with Machinima. And aside from the fact that they paid you, which in the early days of YouTube, people don't know this, there was no monetization model. So the only way to make money was either, you set up your own deals, or what most people did is they joined an MCN.
Hmm.
But aside from that, the pay, did they support you at all? Did they provide you with any help with making the videos, or was it all just on you?
No, they paid me a salary, and it was pretty good. I was making good money, and it was better than I had realized at the time. You know, because like I got lucky because I just came out of high school, went straight into college, and then I got this job offer, and it was enormously helpful. But I didn't realize at the time how helpful it was because you don't really understand how the value of a dollar until you're well into your 20s. You know.
Yeah, well, it was awesome that you had that opportunity to make this series that fans like me still want to follow to this day. And you, at that time, while you were making it, you were also going to film school at that time, right?
Um. Yeah. Well, I graduated from high school, went to college to study game design initially, and I really love video games, but there was something a little too computery about it where I was just like I wasn't really energized about going to class. Film school was different because it felt much more creative, and you'd see the fruits of like your ideas, like be produced much more quickly in front of your eyes, where it's stimulating. It's like, oh, I'm excited because I'm actually making something here. It takes a long time to make a video game, it's so yeah, I really I don't know, I have problems with my film school education, but I'd made a lot of friends there, and there was a real collaborative effort into going into everybody's projects that was really fun and exciting, and I got a lot of hands-on experience. You learn how to proper set protocol, all the lingo that they use over the radios and stuff. And because you're going to work as a PA, and then you'll slip into a job as a grip, or I worked electrics. And yeah, so there's some value there.
Do you think that it affected the way you filmed either the live action sections of the show, or maybe even the machinima sections with the Halo, the free cam?
It taught me to be more attentive to audio design. I had neglected it before then. Like I took an editing class, specifically like audio editing, and then it's so obvious, but it occurred to me in that moment. I was like, oh, this is 50% of the experience. Like I should be paying much closer attention to this than I am. Like I wouldn't even do like I wouldn't pay attention to the ambience tracks in like my videos. I would just like go with the source recording, which is always dog shit. You got to scrap it and like do everything layer by layer from scratch for it to make it sound decent cinematic. But other than that, though, not really, because I had taught myself a lot of like the core principles of good filmmaking just by like growing up and studying movies and watching them over and over again, and like brainstorming and writing my own stuff, even though I wasn't making movies. Well, I was making movies when I was a kid because I had an old JVC mini DV camcorder, and I would do like stop start recording movies, really stupid stuff, right? But I really paid close attention to like movies I liked and how they were shot, and I watched them over and over again, and I always like made note of that. I wanted to like boil it down to a science. Like, what is it I like about these movies so much? And then you just accumulate more and more knowledge on your own. By the time I went to film school, I knew a lot of like the stuff already when it comes to cinematic language and like the most effective shots to capture like a certain dramatic beat, the importance of like where people are situated on a stage, like during a scene. It's like the distance between them matters, and like and like lenses and focal lengths. That's something film school, it taught me like the specifics of the technical side of it. But before that, I knew the importance of lenses on like a vague level. You know what I mean? I knew it was important. I just didn't understand the technicality of it, and film school taught me that.
No, absolutely. And what I could definitely see like a lot of film influences, even in your early work. I think back in season two, there was a sequence that was a reference to American Psycho, I believe, right, with the knife and everything like that.
Yeah.
And what would you say kind of your biggest influences in terms of filmmaking were?
Um, there are certain little movies that weren't necessarily that great, but just always stuck in my mind. The Great Mouse Detective was one, like Disney cartoon, and story. The structure of the story isn't the best, but it's like it that had these really intense cinematic moments that always stuck in my mind, where all the like the music came together and the shot was just right, and like the lighting and like the dramatic. What do you call that when the rain starts falling during a? Yeah, I forget what it is. There's a name for it. Pathetic fallacy, I think it is. But just things, elements like that, where everything mixed together just right, and so cartoons, and I saw Train Spotting in a really young age, and I shouldn't have, but because that's really strong subject matter to watch when you're a kid. But it wasn't that my parents said, "Hey, watch this movie." They were kind of watching it, and I was just like, "Hey, what are you guys watching over there?" And that gave me an eye-opening look into like at reality. And even though it was a movie, it's just like, oh, there's something like really real about this that this movie is portraying. Even though I was old enough to know that it was fake, right? But there's something to that, and it's like, oh, I wonder what other movies are out there that kind of bring shine a light on what being an adult really can be like for some people, you know? And that kind of started my dive into cinema.
Of course, and I think you've talked about this before. Especially around like season five. Breaking Bad and that's hyper serialized style of storytelling. I could definitely see the influences starting there and going way further beyond into like season seven. Um, and I that personally to me too, your work in some ways influenced how I viewed shows like Breaking Bad and The Sopranos later on. I learned a lot of storytelling from an early age from your series, surprisingly enough.
Awesome. That's so cool.
Yeah, so of course, The Sopranos, you're wearing the shirt right now.
It's what's for dinner. Gabagool.
Nice. Um, how did you first, get come across the show? How'd you get into it?
My mom was watching it, and she was just like obsessive over it. And I'm just like, I wonder what all the fuss is about. Because I had already watched like mob movies and stuff. Like it was a genre I really liked. I just, because these shows, there's so many episodes, and it's just like, oh, if I'm going to get into this, I hope it's like really good. Because, there's so much time you got to put into it. But it was that good, like, because like I would kind of watch it over my mom's shoulder, and uh there's you don't really know why yet, but there's an enormous amount of depth to that show, right? And it's like eventually I had seen enough where I was like, shit, I gotta watch this from the beginning, because like there's something to this that's like really valuable to see. And it's it's really got this magical quality, the show. And this sounds kind of cliche, I guess, but I think I can like describe it. I mean, my perspective on it is it feels seamless in a way that a lot of other shows don't. Like even like something like Breaking Bad, there's something very self-contained about each of the episodes. And even if you were to take the cuts to black where they put ad breaks, because it was made for AMC ultimately, right? Even if you were to take those out, you can still kind of identify where you are in the progress in the runtime of an episode based on like a certain set piece. Like a lot of episodes of, I'm using Breaking Bad as an example, but many other shows, their episodes, they revolve around one particular action moment. Sopranos isn't really like that. It kind of treats every one of its scenes as like really intense, and it's like things could kind of change at any moment based on like a single like a tick, like a weird look in someone's eye across the dinner table, and then that can mean the difference between someone getting killed and someone not. You know what I mean? Like there's a really unpredictable quality. It's seamless, um, but not unpredictable in a way that it it's like inorganic to the show. It all feels really organic, and the whole show feels kind of like a blur between one episode and the other, where like I can think of a whole bunch of scenes that are my favorite scenes, but it's hard to remember which episode they were from. Usually I can tell you where a moment in an episode is, but with Sopranos it's a lot harder to do.
No, I definitely agree. Like it's so much of like television is written with the expectation of like the ad breaks. Like we have to hit these beats. We have to end on a cliffhanger or a dramatic note. And I love Breaking Bad, but it's that show is definitely like that. Whereas Sopranos, because it wasn't written that way, it was written almost like a movie. The beats can just kind of flow naturally. They can be very subtle. The conflict can come down to not really super exciting things on the surface level, but the emotions that the characters are feeling. Especially Tony, like a character like that who what wasn't just on a course to from good to bad. He went up and down just like a person does. Some days he's shitty, some days he's a great person, and it just depended on the things that were going on in his life. Of course he was trending downward overall, but there were plenty of instances where he defied expectations or acted incredibly petty, and I just think it adds so much magic, like you said, to the show.
Hmm. Yeah, one of the reasons. I mean, there's a lot of reasons that show has withstood the test of time. One of them is that it's extremely honest in its portrayal of people, like how people work, and a lot of it's driven by pettiness and bitterness. Like I remember David Chase talking about how he wanted all his important plot beats to be something really stupid. Like I don't know if, I'm hesitant to bring up plot beats because I don't know if we're going into spoilers or not, like
No,
when
you
we're
could
talking
totally
about
go
this.
into spoilers. I mean, I went through every episode on my channel already.
Okay, yeah. But like when Junior's going down on women and Tony finds out, and then that like gets out, he's worried, and like um Junior has that one guy killed outside the psychiatrist's office on pure like gut feeling. He's like his henchman is just like, oh, don't worry about it, he's fine. He's like, I don't like it, and he just blows his brains out. And that's an example of how the show can just like really surprise you with something jarringly violent. It's like, holy shit, but it's not forced. It's like, yeah, he was just that petty and scared, and he had the power to do something like that. And the show is full of moments like that. And it makes it compelling to watch because anything could go wrong at any second for any of these characters.
Oh yeah, it showcased, I think, the good and the bad of humanity, and a lot of times it's not these explosive, dramatic moments. It's just general shittiness, general pettiness. And it's interesting you brought up Junior, and his how he dealt with problems, because that's a central plot point of the movie, which we're going to spoil the Many Saints here. We're going to talk about it. So if you haven't seen it yet, what are you doing with your life? Go watch it. Um, but that's a big plot point of the movie is ultimately it's revealed at the end that the big mystery around Christopher's father, Dicky Moltisanti, it was Junior that killed him. And I can believe that. Definitely the things you brought up in the show. He's an insecure guy, and he took out his insecurities and his embarrassments, violently. That's why he tried to kill Tony. Tony has that line in the first season where he's like, "Psychiatry and cunnilingus brought us here," which
Yeah.
is which is such a funny line. But I'm interested to hear your thoughts on the movie. What'd you think about it?
Um so I've watched the film once. I'd like to watch it again. My initial reaction was that I liked it, and I've heard multiple critiques of it, and including yours, and I agree with them because this film is flawed fundamentally. It does lack focus. It's the marketing of it is very curious. Like if you'll notice the poster of it, it says who made Tony Soprano, and it says Tony Soprano in big letters, but he's nowhere near the main character in the film. But and Dickie doesn't feel quite like the main character either, and like he's on the poster behind the text, but his head's cut off, and so it's like an audience member looks at that poster and it's just like, well, who am I following here in this movie? Who am I going to see? Because like I think films really need that. You need like one guy who's like the lightning rod for the audience to connect with and experience the story through. And this film is lacking that, and that's a problem. I acknowledge that. I enjoyed this film on the level, like I looked at it as like DVD extras on like a Sopranos box set or something. It's like 2 hours of deleted scenes or something like that. That doesn't quite line up, but um, you see what I mean? Where it's like it's supplementary material to the show, and I just liked being in that world. I was like, oh, there's Satrials, there's Polly. Like I was a sucker for all like the hey, that's this guy. Remember? Like Polly's there doing his nails and Pussy's introduces himself at the table. I'm like, oh, that's him. And the varsity athlete line, I was waiting for it, and then it happened. I'm like, ah, oh, that's great. So I enjoyed it on that like surface level where I just enjoyed being in that world. I enjoyed seeing the characters again. I thought Michael Gandolfini did a good job. Um, there's like certain moments in that movie that I really liked, like where it's a small moment, but like where young Tony is in his living room at night watching the black and white TV with his family, and he's got like one leg up on one knee and he's picking at his socks. Just like there's such like a homely, like nostalgic element to that scene where it's just like they I feel like they really cared about bringing this moment in Tony's history to life. This is like that's one piece of evidence that I would say that David Chase isn't simply phoning it in or this is a cash grab. I wouldn't put it that low. But the his reasons, um there's reason to believe that they were flawed. David Chase's reasons for wanting to make this film. From what I've read, I think he wanted to make something that was set in the 60s, specifically about the racial tension in the area. And they wouldn't give him the budget for it unless they tied it to the Sopranos somehow because of the brand recognition, right? So then that explains why this movie feels like a, a number of lumps of clay just kind of jammed together into like a uh just under 2 hours or just over 2 hours, something like that.
Yeah. No, I totally agree with all your points. It's exactly what you said too. David Chase wanted to do a film about racial tension, like more of an art house kind of film. He's always wanted to do that. He's always been for a man who changed television. He's always been a movie guy. He's always kind of looked down on TV and wanted to do movies. And this was kind of his. He did not fade away, which was a movie with James Gandolfini in it and John Magaro, who played Silvio, who people have their problems with, but this was the movie he wanted to do, and he was kind of forced to add the Sopranos elements to it. But I don't think he phoned it in at all because it's not just Remember When. I was worried that they were going to do that when the movie came out. It was just going to be a series of callbacks, easy to write, easy to make money on. But the movie is different than what you expect. So I give David Chase a lot of credit for not playing it safe and trying to make something different. And you're right, there is a kind of nostalgic feeling that the movie generates because I watched Talking Sopranos after the movie came out, and they had all the actors on. And when I saw Alessandro, I forget his last name, but when the main character who plays Dickie, when I saw him come on, I smiled because I was like, this guy's a really likable guy. I really liked Dickie. I liked Michael as Tony. I loved Livia. She's the fantastic actress who's in a lot of things. These characters, they really brought these characters to life. Even Sylvia, who, yeah, his performance is a little too, on the nose. Even him, I think he did a good job. Paulie. Um, so I enjoy this movie to that extent too. I think, like you said, there are fundamental flaws with the structure. I do hope we get a sequel. David Chase said he's open to it. He's gonna bring Terry Winter on, who I think is the best writer they had on that show. He would go on to do Boardwalk Empire, and then he wrote The Wolf of Wall Street. Um, the movie has not performed well, unfortunately, probably because of HBO's decision to have it air both like on HBO and the theaters at the same time. So, but it has generated a lot of interest in The Sopranos. I think they've reported that like a lot of people signed up for HBO to watch it. So who knows? We might get a sequel, and they might be able to fix some of the problems they had.
Yeah. Um, I think it's only made like a fifth of its budget so far or something
Yeah,
like that.
not good.
Yeah. It's such a shame because I really like David Chase. I mean, obviously we both respect the shit out of him for The Sopranos, which is like it's so good. It's such a good show, and like he made it, right? And it's amazing because like before the movie came out, you'd think like this guy can do no wrong. This is gonna be awesome. And I watched it, I enjoyed it, and at the end, it was just like it's not quite climactic enough. I wanted a bit more out of this. I wanted more agency from Tony. He doesn't really do much other than like you see him doing these kind of petty scams and stuff, hijacking the ice cream truck, and it's like it's fun stuff, but it's nothing really transformative. I suppose the moment of transformation is him is, I guess, being so frustrated with why he doesn't understand why Dickie kind of closed him off. And I'd need to watch it again. I don't know. I'm not really sure what it is he saw in Dickie that he loved so much.
They don't
Um,
really touch on it. That's one of the problems I had too. Is you can say it's just marketing bullshit of like who made Tony Soprano, but I do think the fundamental idea of the film should have been Dickie's relationship and influence on Tony, because otherwise, why are we watching a prequel? We need to kind of understand that relationship better to understand Tony better and understand Junior better. But you're right; those elements don't really come together in like a climactic or cinematic way. It just kind of fizzles out. I would be really interested to see a director's cut, because if you watch the trailer, there's a scene where Tony's walking with his friends all behind him, a really cool shot, but that's not in the film. That's
mhm.
nowhere to be seen. So there's obviously footage that didn't make it in. It's really confusing why David Chase really insisted on a 2 hour movie. He was like dead set, like it has to be two, it can't be longer. When everyone would have watched a 4 or 5 hour movie. I mean, we got the Snyder cut. People want
Yeah,
a Sopranos. People would watch a whole mini series about this stuff.
if we get four
Um,
hours of that shit, I would
uh,
gladly watch 4 hours of a
yeah,
Sopranos prequel. Yeah,
yeah. So I would love to see a director's cut that might patch together some of the elements that it seems like it's missing. But um, I mean, obviously, I owe a lot to the movie. It's generated interest in the show, and my channel thrived off of that. And yeah, I mean, I'd just be interested to see more from this universe. I think it has more to offer.
yeah. Um, I wanted. I mean, the things I would like from the movie would, I guess, just add to the fundamental issue of that it's not focused enough. Like I wanted more scenes with Carmela, for instance, because I love that one scene at the phone booth where like you can see that she loves him, and then he fights that kid, and
Shoves her away.
yeah, pushes her away, and the camera just kind of pulls away while it's capturing that moment, and that's kind of reflective of what she ends up doing throughout the entire Sopranos series. Is Carmela is always, even from that teenage age, has just tried to keep Tony out from getting into too much trouble, and because she really loves him. And I was just like, it's so like archetypal. Sorry, no problem. It's so archetypal too, because it's kind of like it's almost like what women do is they stop their men from fucking up, and that just echoes again and again throughout history. I really love that beat, but I would have loved an extra scene with Carmela to kind of put an extra bit of context on how she felt about Tony back then. But like I was saying, like that'll just make it even more unfocused because it's like, who am I meant to connect with here? I don't know. That's why I'm saying, like, I feel like that film only functions as like a, you're a Sopranos fan and you're jumping into that world and you're like, hey, there's that guy. Oh, I remember that. Yeah, that's cool. And that's not me trying to like belittle it. Like I really enjoyed that method of like ingesting that content. You know what I mean? I had a good
No,
time.
yeah, you need to be a Sopranos fan to enjoy it, even to the level that we do. Without it, you're just like, who are these people? Why do I care?
Yeah.
But yeah, I would have loved a mini series, and had the chance to explore all these tangents of like Carmela. I would have. That was the guy. The kid he was fighting was Jackie Aprile, the boss who dies. 2 or 3
Oh my
episodes into.
god, I didn't know
It
that.
is, yeah. No, you don't know that because they don't really like. There's just one line where in the ice cream truck, he's like, "Jackie, can you drive stick?" Um,
Oh,
other
okay.
other than that, you would have missed it. But that's a character who I would have loved to learn more about. He's gone in a flash in the series. I would have loved to see more about him. I would have loved to learn more about Paulie. Learn more about any of these guys. But you're right, it would have distracted from the little focus that we got. But if it was a mini series, 10 episodes, we could have had time to explore all of these tangents. But
Yeah.
it is what it is. And maybe we'll get another sequel and be able to explore Tony's 20s when he's just getting into the mob. And like I said, Terry Winter is the best writer they had, so I'd be really interested to see his take on the series.
Yeah, Terry Winter's good. The title at least gives you a clue as to the scattershot nature of like who you're meant to be connecting with on the screen. It's just like people in multiple groups who think they're doing the right things for the right reasons, right? They're all saints, the many saints. But that there's so much material there that the film format is too narrow. The bandwidth is too small of for the on the medium to like really capture that lore of the Sopranos in a satisfying way. So maybe it would have worked better as a series, but I don't know. I don't want the spin-off to become a series because I feel like it's just not going to live up to like the original Sopranos. But I mean, I'm not the type of person who will let like a certain season of television affect my perception of the rest of the show because I just think that's an unrealistic way to look at art, particularly television, where I look at seasons as individual bubbles of like practicality, where it's just like, okay, we've got these actors for this amount of time. They're at this point in their lives where they're feeling good and stuff. And like we've got good writers and everything's coming together and you can have a really quality season of television. And then season 4 you could have, well, like new people will come in, other people will be having like schedule conflicts where they're shooting another movie or something because of their success off the previous season, and it's like we only have them for x amount of days, so you got to make some compromises. And maybe some of the key creative members are going through shit in their lives where they suffer the loss of a loved one or something, and then that affects the work. And it's like, what are you going to do? Are you going to let that poor season kind of ruin your image of the rest of the show? That's why the whole Game of Thrones phenomenon pisses me off, because I'm just like, man, there's some quality television there, and everybody hates this 8th season. It's like illegal to like it. So, and there's plenty of reasons not to like it. I'm not saying it's great, but it's like, man, there's so much good stuff there, and it's like no one even talks about the show anymore. It was just gone like almost instantly after like the season 8 finale. Like nobody even read the word of any season of it. And I'm just like, man, that sucks, you know. And I don't want the same thing to happen to this. I think the Sopranos can just stand on its own as like a rigid pillar of what television could be, because it was just amazing in so many aspects.
Oh, it's so funny that you brought that up too, because I'm literally working on a video talking about the good things about Game of Thrones. That'll be coming out later, but I agree with you so much. Like, yeah, that last season was horrible, but you can still like the beginnings. There's a lot of good stuff to appreciate, and the show, The Sopranos, will always be this golden beacon of television. Like, at one point there was this masterpiece on television, and we've been chasing it ever since. Breaking Bad is chasing The Sopranos, Boardwalk Empire, even The Wire, which I'm watching right now, and a lot of people consider to be the second best, if not the best show compared to The Sopranos, is in some ways affected by it. They happened at a short. The Wire came out shortly after The Sopranos. It was like around season 3 or 4 when The Wire came out, but even that was influenced by it. So yeah, I think it's this amazing thing that changed television forever. And the movie doesn't really. I'll also give credit to this. The movie doesn't try to rewrite The Sopranos. Even the stuff with Junior, I can believe it. That is his character. People will say, it completely changes how I perceive Junior. Not really. He was always doing shit like that. He tried to kill Tony, twice. He was conspiring with Richie in the second season. This is just what these guys do. It's the only thing I hated, and that did change The Sopranos, was the narration.
Mm,
The Christopher is in hell bit. I hated it. There was always the supernatural on The Sopranos, like the pussy ghost in the mirror, the Virgin Mary, but it was always subtle, and it was always just like maybe they're just imagining it. But this
yes.
movie's like, no, no, Christopher's in hell.
Yeah.
He's there, and he's
Right.
he's ready to tell you his whole story.
That ambiguity is gone. Right.
Yeah. I think they added that in last minute. I don't think that was originally. It seems like something that like the studio's like, hey, we need more of a connection to The Sopranos. Get Michael
Mm,
Imperioli on here. Let's
that's
record him.
that's a good point.
Could be.
Yeah, could be the case. Um, yeah, there's certain ingredients that they really nailed. The guy who played Junior, great. I'm like, that's Junior. Holy shit. And Olivia, she's one of my favorite people in that movie. Like, just she, because when you have to be really careful when you play an actor like Olivia, because it's very easy to fall into parody, right? Where you just kind of exaggerate all the qualities that everybody loved about her. But she kept it authentic. Like, she was restrained enough where she kept her as a believable character, and you can see how she would grow into that person that was eventually Olivia in The Sopranos, right? And some of my favorite parts, like she's in the principal's office telling her Tony's grades, and that, like, he's not book smart but he's intelligent, and the part where she has it revealed to her that Tony's best memory was when she, like, read him a book in bed, and it was one the happiest memory of his life, and that brings her to tears. And but it's not like happy tears. It's like she's, like, angry that Tony loves her. Like, she's such a fucking toxic, weird person, right? I wanted maybe a little bit more backstory on that too, as to what shaped Olivia into being this very troubled person.
Yeah.
You know?
It would have been interesting to see because you're right. In that scene where the principal says he's smart, Livia snorts. Like she's like she doesn't believe it. Like that's how little she thinks of her son.
Yeah.
And you can see where Tony kind of gets his toxic behavior in the show, always putting people down and things like that. It obviously was influenced a lot by Livia, even after she dies in the show.
Hmm.
And they have that moment where she tries to be a better mom for a minute. She cooks him the hamburger and is trying to be nice to him, and he says one thing and it sets her off.
She builds up that
And
Jenga tower just to knock it
yeah,
down, right?
knock it
Like,
down.
and to
Yeah,
have that catharsis of negativity where she has an
yeah, and then
excuse to hate him more.
yeah, and then the drugs that Dickie was going to get for her and it never does, and it adds this kind of layer of tragedy where maybe if she'd gotten the drugs, she would have been more balanced, a better person, and then all the shit in The Sopranos wouldn't have happened. But that's the irony of their fate, is that the family kind of destroys each other. Junior destroys this chance of Livia to kind of get healthy.
Yeah. I saw the movie as a net positive, not a huge positive, but it was a net positive in that it I don't think it did any damage to The Sopranos. I left the movie thinking that it it gave a little bit of enrichment to some characters, and I was okay with that. Like one of my favorite parts is about Tony. Tony's not even in the scene, but it's like they're at a wake or something, and Janice walks up to Olivia and says, "Oh, Tony snuck into the place where they're keeping the dead bodies." And it shows that even back then he had a real curiosity about death and his own mortality, and he was, even from a young age, in touch with something that was beyond anything else, like the mafia or anything kind of earthly. Like he wondered what it all means, even from that young age. And I appreciated that bit of lore where it's like he was always a deep thinker. And I throughout it adds extra context to the fact that he felt so alone in The Sopranos. Like he would constantly be looking around at his like henchmen, like Paulie and Christopher, and they're all trying to like gain his approval, but all through like the shallowness of that mafia life. And I think he saw that and he was angry. He hated them for that, but he can't really say anything about it because he's like the king of the mafia. Like why wouldn't they look up to him that way? But he always knew like there's something more to life than this, but I'm stuck in this fucking mob role that I don't even really want, but I have to keep it up because like you feel so bad for people like that who like they're they're clean slates and they could really make something of their lives, but they're caught in this avalanche that is like the mafia life. And like if you act like you're too like if there's too much good in you and the people around you see that, they'll see you as untrustworthy and eventually they'll pick you off, you know? So you have to kind of mutually work with them, and then eventually that eats away at your soul and they have dirt on you, and then you commit a murder eventually, and then it's like, well, I'm on this downward slope now, I might as well ride it and be the king of hell kind of thing. That's I really Tony was always a really tragic character to me.
Oh, you hit the nail on the head because there's even a line in the movie where it's when Livia and Johnny and Dickie and his wife are in the car. They're talking about Tony, and Livia says he should go to work for my cousin or whatever at the patio store. Now, the idea of Tony selling patio furniture is a recurring theme throughout the show. He says that in season one, if I hadn't gone into this life, I would be selling patio furniture. And in the coma dream, I talked about this in one of my videos. His alternate life, where he's not in the mob, he has a dream. You know, when he's in the coma, he started out in that fake life as a patio furniture salesman before he started selling military whatever. Um, so the idea of the patio furniture has always been a recurring theme of like where Tony's life could have gone if he hadn't gotten sucked into this life, which I agree with you, he hates.
Mm.
He might not even know at times he hates it, but it's this toxic mentality that's constantly pulling him down and causing him misery. And yeah, he's getting the money, but what the fuck does that matter when you've got nothing in your life, like no loved ones, even your family starts to resent you for all the things you've done. And it's a tragedy. That
Yeah.
is what the show is. It's a very funny, explosive tragedy at times. But you know, we love it. We love watching it.
Yeah, it's like uh it's no surprise that he suffers from panic attacks and wanted to talk to a therapist because he could die any day. He could just walk around the wrong corner and have a gun in his face. Like that's what that being in that life means, right? Like you you might be the butt of some beef that you didn't even know was going on, and next thing you know, you got a bullet in your head, and you know, like who's going to look after your family? He's worrying about that. Like, and so like you really understand his panic attacks, and every time he has a panic attack in the show, there's like some deep psychological reason for it. I always really That was one of the things I gravitated like to really early on, like is the depths of all like the beats that happen where it's like, oh, he feels this way because like he said this and that other thing. Like there's so many layers to every beat that happens. And it's not obvious. Like I've seen Sopranos now, like the whole series probably 4 times over at least. Every time I watch it, I'm still discovering new things and like scenes that I didn't even know were there. I'm so, oh, I must have missed this, like shit. Or I'll make connections where it's like, oh, that's why you did that. Like, and I'll watch it again and again, and it's so dense, but yet like all the scenes feel like they have enough room to breathe at the same time. That's what another. There's so many like really profound qualities to that show that other shows don't have.
It's different in a way that's like there's shows like Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul, which it always seems like I'm ragging on them when I compare them to The Sopranos. I'm not. I love both of those shows, but there's a lot of like things you can notice that are like just like physical stuff. Like you'll see the teddy bear that was burned in the plane crash. You'll see it in a scene in season one. That's like a really physical thing you can notice. The
Mm-hmm.
Sopranos doesn't have too much of that. That's not really what David Chase was all about. But he was all about the emotional. Like you could see these emotional beats that you didn't notice at first that were there. A scene might be funny at first, and then you look at it again and you're like, oh no, this is horrible. What's happening here? I was laughing the first time I saw it because I didn't really notice it, but these characters, some of them are dying on the inside as they make these jokes or they, do whatever. He hides emotion within this narrative of humor and action and sex and power. Tony comes off as a very powerful, masculine guy, but at his heart, he feels weak. He feels vulnerable, and that's why he's so endearing compared to a lot of action heroes that we see in movies.
Yeah, he's definitely a boy at heart, and he resents having to put up a front constantly because he has no choice. Otherwise, you're gonna get picked off. Like that interaction between all the mafia family heads, like it's all pleasantries and hey, how you doing? Like I love you, man, and mwah, mwah, cheek kissing. It's all bullshit, all of it, because they'd all sell each other out in a second if it meant like if it worked in their benefit, and they'll they they're constantly assessing each other for weakness, and if one is perceived as weak enough, they'll all just go in and devour them like piranhas, right? And so he knows that, but it's like you never see it on the surface. On the surface, it's all romanticized and candlelit dinners and all this shit, and he knows it's bullshit deep down, and that terrifies him. And so it's no surprise that he would seek therapy. But I understand that one of the critiques the show gets is how unrealistic it is for somebody in the mob to be seeing a therapist. I think a fact like that, if a mob guy, especially a boss, was seeing a therapist, that information would get out much earlier than it did in the show through whatever sneaky means, and he would probably be killed off. I would say. I said the chances are pretty high he would be killed early. Nobody would stand for it.
I mean, there's so many like unrealistic things in the show. Like these guys murder left and right and never get caught. Like Paulie and Christopher kill a waiter that just served them, and then they
Yeah.
take the money that they owed for the like the police are gonna be like, we're missing the bill from this table of all these mobsters, and this guy was killed. I wonder who took the money. Like,
Yeah.
they would get caught like so quickly. But that's a suspension of disbelief. I mean, you got to have that. I mean, even in your show, there's always this element of like, we're suspending disbelief here a little bit to allow for a great story and to just enjoy it.
Yeah.
And I'd love to take it back to talk a little bit more about your show because it's something I'm so interested in.
Sure.
I'm wondering if the Sopranos had any kind of influence on it. I know it wasn't maybe those early seasons, but I know especially this latest season deals a lot with like psychology and psychological trauma. And I'm wondering if that has any influence on how you tell the story.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the ending of season 7 was hugely inspired by the end of the controversial end of The Sopranos, which I loved, but it pissed so many people off, right? Because I think most people, I think, don't really get it. Um, Maybe that's changed over time. I know initially people saw that ending when it initially broadcast, and they were like, "What the fuck? Did the signal cut out? What happened?" Um, but that always really stuck out to me, and I didn't really understand it at first, but I was like rewatching it and listening to other people's takes on it and reading essays about it. I'm like, oh, that's why. Like, oh shit, this is actually wow, this is so good. And I thought of um taking elements from that ending and applying it to my own ending, but eventually I changed that up quite a bit because it didn't feel like it mapped on quite right. And I feel like I'm just going to be pissing people off, and I'm just going to be like trying to be too much like the Sopranos, that I should do it this way. But that ending did influence like how this sense that things were inevitable, and like that ending of the Sopranos was like foreshadowed throughout the whole thing, like right from episode 1. And that I think that's what I was latching onto, where I just like I, when I made season 7 of Arby and the Chief, I wanted to kind of bookend it with like this sense of inevitable destruction. Like throughout that show, it was kind of like how the toys are deteriorating. And anybody who doesn't know what Arby and the Chief is, by the way, it's about toys that come to life and play Halo. And
You should watch it if you have not seen it. It sounds when you describe it silly, but like we've been talking about, there is actually this emotional story that's told through it. And yeah, it's lampshaded that this conflict is silly at times. But one of the things that I noticed in that ending was, yeah, that season 7 was dark. A lot of horrible stuff happens, but the ending, just like the ending of The Sopranos, had this element of um like goodness to it. Like I like Chief at like telling Arby, can you wait for me at the gates? I don't want to go in alone. I want us to be together.
yeah,
Even though they had both done horrible things to each other throughout that season and their relationship had been breaking, there's still this element that, like, yeah, they hate each other at times, but at their core, they only have each other, and they have to love each other um in this way. So I really gravitated towards that, emotional part of the ending.
right.
Um, and of course, this upcoming season's got a lot of dark, horrible stuff to it. We're getting into spoilers, and I want to preface this because this is a recent, not recent, but an episode that happened recently and is part of the story. For you, the decision to kill yourself, where did that sounds weird if you haven't seen the show, but um, where did that come from? What made you decide to go that route with it?
Um, One of the biggest themes of this new season I'm doing is purpose. Um, like you're here, you're alive. What do you do with that time, right? And that's always been a dilemma for Arbiter in particular, because he's a deeper thinker than Chief. He kind of thinks of the big picture, and he just like he died at the end of season 7, but he's resurrected in season 8 for reasons that aren't explained yet. But I'm coming to that. But he's just like, even before he was curious about his purpose on Earth, but now he's been resurrected and he knows he died. So it's like, why am I here now again? And the purpose of that is like to really make him think like there must be a reason I'm here now. And like, so what do I do? What can I do? Because I'm so like limited physically as to what I can do. I don't really want to reveal myself to the outside world. Um, and there's a long stretch of that season in the near the start where they're kind of just floating in purgatory, and Arbiter's thinking like, I must have no purpose then. Well, maybe if I exist, I'm resurrected, I'm here again, I still can't make anything of my life. The, either everything's chaos or God must be cruel, if if there is one. And so I cement this feeling of purposelessness, and then I die, right? And then Arbiter sees that, and it's like a corpse is on the floor in this room now. And that's compared to like the purposelessness before. Now it's like, holy shit, maybe I'm supposed to do something about this, right? Because like, what else is he gonna do? It's like, maybe this is my purpose in life, to get to the bottom of this and stop whatever terrible thing it was that led this to occur. And then now the toys are like targeting the villain Adam in the season, and they have kind of the means to do it based on some technology that was introduced in previous seasons. and Arbiter is ideologically possessed, and that's like a real scary thing, right? That can happen to people. Like there's an expression, people don't have ideas, ideas have people, right? Where it's like generations and generations pass, but there's still these ideas that seem to float in the ether, that capture people and lead people to do the same things again and again throughout history. And people can feel such conviction and be so convinced that they're on this yellow brick road of like good intentions, right? It's just like, I know this is the right thing. But what Arbiters is ultimately doing is considering killing a child. It's like it's a 13-year-old villain in my show who's like causing mass death. And so I ended up dividing my audience, but in a good way with that thing. I'm like, yes, this is what I wanted, because it's like, what is the right way forward? Life's not as simple as you might think, right? It's like, do you stop the mass death at the cost of a piece of your own soul, or maybe your soul in its entirety? Because is there any redemption after killing a child of all people, even just a person? People in war, when they fight in a war and they kill one person, a lot of those guys aren't the same after that, because there's something about taking another life that is like really upsetting. It's destabilizing on a fundamental level, right? And so those were the ideas that interested me for season 8. And I'm not quite finished it yet. I've still got like 2 feature length episodes to go. I was in production up for a long time, and now I've been taking a break for a while just because it's really heavy. And I've shot a lot of it. I've written them both, and I will get back to it. Uh, just need a bit more time to finish it off. But yeah, that's season 8 of Arby and the Chief. I've done 7. I did 7 seasons with Machinima, and this 8th one I'm doing independently on my own channel.
Uh, well, I just gotta say that like this season has been some of the best work you've ever done. I
Thank you,
love the
man.
change up with. You're welcome. I love the change up with um, Arby and Master Chief. Master Chief has suddenly become, if perhaps not the voice of reason, the voice of innocence. That because maybe he doesn't think as deep as Arbiter, he's not been led into this dark place that Arbiter is in. And I love that change, and I love that you still have room to go with these characters because they've dealt with horrible stuff. We saw that in season 7. We saw that all the way back in season 5, even when it was just about relationships and loneliness. And there's still places to explore. And you brought up the intro sequence, which is this long stretch across a number of episodes that is in some ways a reference to 2001: A Space Odyssey, and also a reference to them being in purgatory and in the state that they're in. I gotta commend you that not only was it an interesting story in and of itself, what's happening in the dream or whatever we'll call it, this compelling drama with Chief or Pal,
Mhm.
um, the way you turn it at the very end there is not only hilarious, like it's so shocking, but also connected to other stuff that's happened in the series. Like I was just blown away. I was like, you just took me like in a completely different direction, and my God, that build up to that was so incredible.
Thank you, man. I really appreciate that. I was proud of that beat, you know, and I obviously love that movie. And I felt like there's something in like the archetype of that film that I feel maps onto the show overall. Just the way like the role that Pal plays in opposition to Arbiter, and like uh I wanted to like, because I think on the I've always like been fascinated with internet culture and subculture, right? And it's perceived as very toxic, and it is. But I think people misattribute the toxicity to like actual hatred, when a lot of the case a lot of the time is that these are bored kids at home, who probably had a bad day at work or at school, and then they come home, they're in front of their keyboard or they got their video game headset on, and they just kind of let loose with bullshit and trash talk and stuff, and it's boredom, like, because they don't really know. they they're looking just for some excitement and laughs, and they don't really know how else to like entertain themselves. So, and that's kind of reflected in the 2001 stretch, because it's boredom that corrupts Pal, who's initially like this perfect computer, corrupted by boredom, has a computer failure, and it degenerates into this like half-ass talking toxic entity. And but at its core, there's something there that's like human and innocent, and that's kind of always been what Chief is. His character has always been that. I feel like it might, if you just kind of glance at the certain clips of the show, that's not, won't be obvious, because Chief says some pretty horrendous things. But if you look carefully, there's beats where it's like, oh, he's not totally irredeemable, like, and he projects this very toxic front because he wants to always like push people away because he's afraid of intimacy. There's a lot psychologically that I put into these characters, right? And it's like what they say and do on the surface isn't necessarily reflective of what they are at their core. And in this season 8, at this moment in time, Arbiter is really struggling with the idea that maybe he's the villain of his own story, you know, where he was waiting for this bad guy to come along, and then it was me the whole time. And and so like Arbiter at his core, he's like, maybe I'm an evil person, and Chief is like saying, maybe we shouldn't do this reprehensible thing. And like you were saying, is the voice of reason in that instance, even though he's completely unreasonable 99% of the time. So there's a duality there where they're kind of reflections of each other in like a twisted way, and like their kind of roles are flipped, what they are in their core, what they are in the outside. And I'm sorry if I didn't address what it was you initially asked. I might have gone off
No,
the
no, no.
rails
I
a bit
was I
there.
was literally just praising that sequence because
Okay.
it's exactly what you said. When he turns Hal back on, and Hal's like, "I'm sorry, like I didn't mean to do all this." I felt that innocence and that heartbreakingness to Chief's character, and it is really, really incredible how much depth that you've managed to add to talking toys with robot voices. Um, it really, on the surface level, seems like it's just a silly thing that's happening, but there is this core of emotion that a lot of shows, like we've talked about, don't manage to achieve. And it's done through this conflict that you do have to suspend your disbelief a little bit to it, that's happening over video games. But I still think those emotional consequences to their actions feel as real to me as anything that happens on television or movies or anything like that.
Yeah. Thank you. It's comes down to the writing so often. I mean, it's just so key to any piece of film work. There's other elements. I mean, everything's important, right? But like all the characters and the ideas, they're all in the screenplay, right? And if that's not good, then you're not off to a good start. And so I always put a tremendous amount of focus on the screenplay for everything that I did. And I had a lot of fun doing it. I like exploring these characters and like treating them with like seriousness, like what would they actually say if this if this could actually happen, these toys were alive, how would they actually behave, right? And from the beginning, when I made the show, one of the objectives was to show people what you can accomplish with a $0 budget. You don't need actors and whatever, like real pyrotechnics and stuff and guns. Like you can just write something really quality and you can find a way to like shoot it. I found puppets. You can do the same thing with like popsicle stick men, because if you study, like I studied a bit of comic books, like graphic novel work in college, and when you study that and you study how like panels are drawn, like you realize everything boils down to icons, right? Where it's like you have a representation of a person, like it can be film, it can be a cartoon, it can be sock puppets, right? Like it could be literally anything, but like the if the writing is strong enough, you can make people care about those dumb things on the screen, and their facial expression doesn't even necessarily matter because of a phenomenon in film called the Kuleshov effect. You might be familiar with this, right? Where what what an audience is thinking that a character is thinking isn't necessarily due to anything that they're saying or the look on their face. It's about what the shot is juxtaposed against, right? So the famous example is the guy looking at a bowl of soup. It's like, oh, he's hungry. The guy looking at a bicycle, it's like, oh, he wants to ride a bike, right? It's like, what is he looking at? And that people kind of fill in the blanks, right, in their head when they're watching it. So I wanted to like demonstrate these things with the show, and I always took a lot of pride in how stupid it was, right? So like I took this stupid concept and I wrote it as if like it could actually happen, and I treated the characters with as much authenticity as I could. I mean, I wasn't a skilled writer in the beginning. I had to work at that, you know. But like I always had a drive to like be better and to like evolve the show if I could. And I did that really drastically in season 5 when I adopted the serialized format instead of everything so self-contained. And I pissed some people off, and understandably so, but a lot of people were just like, "Oh, this is," I'm like, I find this much more compelling now. And I wouldn't have I'm glad I did what I did, even though it meant some polarization. Like I saw it as growth, and shows like The Sopranos were what inspired me to do that. Breaking Bad in particular, but The Sopranos as well, and like Dexter, and all these shows that The Sopranos kind of paved the way for, and they offered something that film didn't, where when an episode cuts to black at the end, it's like, oh shit, I gotta watch the next one. You don't get that with film, right? It's so like, oh, that's the end of the film. I don't need to see like sequel or whatever. Well, maybe some day down the line, but I just love that hook of episodic television where it's just like you got to watch the next one, right? And you could build up to some really intense last shot, and like so many of my favorite moments in television are Breaking Bad is a great example of this, where it's like the last shot of an episode is so fucking eerie, and then like it cuts to black, and then it goes like executive producer is like, holy shit, I gotta put on the next one now. Like I can't go to bed, even though I should. I gotta put on the next episode. That always fascinated me. I'm just like, can I bring that into my show where it's just like I gotta watch the next one. I gotta watch the next one. It was fun doing that, and I thought I could make it work. And I wanted to challenge myself too. I'm like, can I make something? Can I stretch out something long term and build up to a really strong finale? Like I took that. I'm like, if I'm going to do this serialized thing, I should take full advantage of it and try and build up to something really big in the last one. And so with season 5, I had this in-game wedding crash, which is based on a real thing. People will get married in World of Warcraft and Halo and shit. I'm just like, really? And so I'm like, I'll kind of make fun of that. And and so I built up to this big wedding thing, and every season kind of revolves around some big like finale moment. And that really excited me doing that. I wasn't satisfied just doing the quick self-contained videos anymore. That was fun. Like I got nothing against that part of my old work. There's shows I did before that that I'm not happy with now in retrospect, but I was always proud of the Arby and the Chief episodes that I did. But eventually it was just like I got to change this up because what I'm doing isn't really compelling anymore. And that contributed to the loss of viewership with Machinima, which, you know, they weren't happy about obviously, but I was just like, I don't know what to tell you. Like I feel creatively this is where I want to go, and I know not everyone likes it, but I'm kind of tired of doing the same thing over and over. So,
I
I don't
think
know.
it worked out in your favor though, because you know if it hadn't gotten serious, it wouldn't have gotten compelling to the point where people would still want to follow you and support you even after all these years later. Like Machinima had a bunch of funny series. How many of them are still going? None that I know of.
Oh yeah, especially since those a lot of those archives were just deleted. You know, some people couldn't recover their shows, and so it doesn't exist. You go to look for it, it's gone.
I mean, even still, like even if they'd had them, I think that humor runs its course, right? Things. You'll move on. There'll be something else funny. But when you're telling like a story like this, that you're actually like falling in love with these characters and wanting to follow their journeys, that compels you to watch. Years later and continue to follow this series, just like I have all these years. Um, and I think that the silliness too. There's something to the fact that the toys there's something that makes them more realistic than without it because one of the things that David Chase said about the Sopranos was um, the problem with any kind of family drama where you're like they're constantly like fighting with each other or whatever is there's always this question of why don't you just leave. You can do that, you can just get out, walk out your door and go do something else. The Sopranos address this by the fact that they're all in the mob. There's no quitting. They're stuck in this world. They can't get out. And I think your show does the same thing, which is that like they can't go do anything else. They can't just turn off the Xbox and go live happy lives. This is all they have. This is all they'll ever have. And it adds a level of realism of why they're drawn into these conflicts, these characters that they interact with, why they make the bad decisions they make. There's a level of realism there to me that the toy aspect adds to.
Yeah. Uh I think sometimes the show got a little too real. I don't want to sound like a dick about it, like I'm some profound writer or anything, but I'm just saying like I was going through some shit in my 20s, and like it was tough, man. And I it was a lonely time in my life where I wasn't really hanging out. I mean, there's months went by where I was literally just working on the show and that's it. I would go to bed, wake up, write, shoot, go to bed. Like it was, and play some video games in there too, but like there was there like I was talking about before, an immense amount of pressure to get a video out at the end of that week, right? So I was just constant work and constantly feeling burnt out, and I wasn't engaging in any social events. And I was in this state of like unease constantly because I wasn't really sure where my life or career was heading, because YouTube is just such a, I don't know what to make of it. Like, especially back then, I was just like, the possibilities are endless and it could be good or bad. You know, it's like, am I on the right track? Like, should I be doing film gigs like my other film school friends who are constantly working on sets and posting pictures of themselves on Facebook going, hey, having a great time with my buds. Yeah. It's like, it isn't working in film. It's just, oh, this is the film life. It's like, oh, it's hard work, but we're having a good time. Like I'm just sitting alone in a dark room going, oh God, like maybe I should be doing that. And, but I mean, there's a cost to that because I feel you just end up being a little cog in a giant machine where the content a lot of the time isn't that good. At least when me doing what I was doing, I was writing my own stuff and I had full control over it, creative control, and I was editing every frame of it. And that got really grating a lot, but I do like being in that position. And it is, there are parts of the whole process that are immensely fun, but then it's like a huge drag for a lot of it as well, where it's just like, okay, it's not fun anymore, but I got to get this video done. Like, it's so soul crushing. But when I would finally finish a video and put it out and like comments would come in, that really like, that was like a adrenaline shot, right? Where it's just like, oh fuck, real people are really digging this. And that gave me some energy on the next script. And I'd use that, like I'd pour as much of that into that script as I could. But eventually I just get tired again. I'm like, oh shit.
I totally know what you mean by that. Like even my videos, which I have so much respect for filmmakers like you who record their own stuff because all I'm doing really is putting together footage that already exists and adding audio and stuff like that. And I've tried filming stuff for videos here and there, and it's so difficult work when you're actually creating the footage yourself. So I got so much respect for the people like you who do that. But even my little taste of the work that I do, I feel the same way as you. It's like it's editing takes so much time. There's so much that goes into it that people don't realize, even for like a 5 minute little thing. You're layering in effects and mixing audio and doing all this stuff, and they're gonna watch 5 minutes of it, and then they're gonna be like, okay, where's the next one?
Yep.
Um, but yeah, there is something so great about this where yeah, it has its is this draining on your energy to making content like this, but when you get to put something that you made out there into the world, I don't think there's anything that can compare to that. Working for someone else or working on someone else's vision. And I think your story in particular is a great example of, if you can make it on your own, you should. Even if you're getting a smaller slice of the pie, having it all yours is way better than like selling out to these large conglomerations that are going to screw you one day, um, or take something from you. I mean, a lot of times, I'm sure this was true for you too. They come at you when you're at the beginning, where they are offering you more than you might be giving to them. But over the course of your career, that's going to change, and you're going to be giving way more than you're getting.
Yes.
So yeah, I warn everyone who wants to do this, like if you can find a way, like live in with roommates, do whatever you can to cut costs where you can do this all on your own. It's going to be way better for you than selling out for the paycheck of these huge companies.
Yes, I totally agree. And like the equipment's out there, it's all more affordable than it's ever been. Like to get a camera, a little audio recorder or something, and just make good shit and focus on like writing something that's quality and funny. And you can make some cool stuff with not much money. And yeah, I always hope that was a major takeaway from the show. I wanted to touch again on like the darkness of it, because like we were talking about season 7, how dark it is. Um, uh, I didn't want to be gratuitous with its darkness, and but I never saw it as like I want to put out something negative. It was always about like positivity and like. But I feel like the approach when you're trying to like cure someone else's depression, one option is to pat them on the head and go, there, it'll all be okay, right? And that might help some people. Sometimes people just need to hear like it'll be okay. For other people, and I would put myself into this category, sometimes it's more therapeutic to have the horror of life illustrated in a way by another person that makes you realize like, oh, they're going through the same thing that I'm going through, and I'm not alone in this. And they were so specific about certain details about the horror of existence, and trying to figure out your place in the world, and like the isolation and feeling inadequate, and like the event horizon that is what it is to be alive right now, because we're on this technological upswing that's so insane. And like it's impossible to predict where we're going to be like 5, 10, 20 years from now. And it fucking scares me, man, where we're going to be with all this like technology and like the big tech organizations and all this data collection. And like I worry about what kind of society we're all going towards. And I worry about all this top down control because everything is done through computers and phones, especially right now through the lockdowns and such, right? Um, and it's hard to, like, a few decades ago, I think it was easier to predict where you would be in a matter of decades, and you could find some peace in that. It's hard to find peace nowadays, and like because anything could happen, like feels things right now just feel so unpredictable. And that kind of that that real sense of uneasiness that comes with being in your 20s, especially in this modern generation. I felt like I captured some of that in season 7, and
Oh, you totally did.
I still get emails from people saying, "Man, that season was dark, but I related to it in a way that I haven't seen from a lot of other shows, and I really appreciate the work that you did." And I always love to hear notes like that, where it's just like, that's great. Like, I wrote this with that intention and I achieved that, even if it's just for one person. But it wasn't just one person. A lot of people have appreciated it. And because it was so dark, because I kind of went into some very specific detail on what that darkness is and how it makes you feel. And that was powerful for people. And you know, I'm really pleased with what I've done, and I feel like if I died tomorrow, I could feel a sense of accomplishment, you know? Cuz not a lot of people get that, where they really had a hugely positive effect on someone's life. I mean, some people, they if they feel they've done that for even just one person, it's like, wow, like like I had a positive role to play in life. And knowing that there are people who are such fans of the show and what I've done and the particular way I handled it, it's really it's satisfying. And I've currently, I feel like I don't there's not some big mountain that I feel I still need to climb to justify my existence. It's just like, I made this good show already. I think it's good. People are digging it. And I'm enjoying just continuing to make stuff. And you know, sometimes I don't always hit the mark, but I always try my best to push myself. And I'm just enjoying content production. I'm taking a bit of a break right now at this specific moment, but it's something I always enjoyed.
That's so good to hear. And, I literally, me, like this person you're talking to right now, I am one of those people who you have helped immensely through your work. Not only like was I inspired by you to make content, and hopefully my work in some way can help someone else too. But like I said, a lot of the emotions that you explored in the show are something that I related to. And season 7, I took away as positive. Like, yeah, there was a lot of darkness. Eugene gave into that darkness, but Arby and the Chief, they didn't. They came out. Yeah, they died at the end, and they came back later, but their relationship, that episode ended on a positive note for me. Like, they had accepted that they were going to die, but it wasn't that they were like hopeless about it. It was, in some ways, it was more hopeful. They're like, we're still going to be together on the other side here. And I always took that season as a very positive message. It went through the valley of darkness to get there. But a lot of your work, I mean, has inspired a lot of people like me, and we're so grateful to have you here. And we cannot wait for more work from you. Whenever it comes, we'll always be here to watch, enjoy your show, and support your work. Um, I feel like that's a great place to end it on. I feel like we've ended on a very positive note, just like your show. So I will say thank you so much for coming on this podcast, John. It was amazing to talk to one of my inspirations, and I hope we get a chance to continue to connect.
Hey, no problem. Thank you very much for your kind words. I really appreciate that. Thank you for having me on. And I dig your channel too. I'm subscribed to you now. I've been binging your Soprano logs. They're great. And your channel is doing pretty good. Like, I was really pleased to see that. And I hope it takes off, man, because your stuff is good. You're teaching me stuff. Like, I'm usually the person who's telling other people like the symbolism in the Sopranos, where it's just like, oh, that actually means this. I don't know if you knew this, but enjoying like having this knowledge of the Sopranos. But you were taking me to class, man. I'm sitting there watching some of your videos. I'm just like, holy shit! Like, I'm still discovering new things about this show, and you pointed them out for me. So you're doing good, man. I like your videos.
Thank you so much for that. That really means a lot to me. And stay tuned for the next episode of the Pure Kino podcast, coming, I don't know when. Talk to you guys soon.